for the entire campaign. So thanks everybody for being here. I was supposed to be here last month, and I know many of you heard my grandmother back in Pennsylvania passed away. She was 93. It was sort of sudden, and so we had to miss it last month. But I appreciate everybody's kind words. My campaign manager was here last month and passed along everyone's condolences, so I appreciate that. I am Adam Milasincic. I'm running for state representative in District 138, which if you live in this general area, you're probably either in my district, I know Dee is, or in John Rosenthal's district 135, and I think he spoke here recently. And roughly the cutoff line is sort of Spencer. If you're south of Spencer, you're probably in my district. And if you are south of Spencer and would like a yard sign, I brought some for you. So this was one of the first meetings that I had the opportunity to attend about a year and a half ago already when I first started running for this. And so it's great to be back and see everybody. Apologize for being late. I was at a fundraiser for Deidre Davis, who's one of our great Democratic candidates running for a civil district judge in the 270th District Court. My day job, like Penny, is as a civil litigator, and so I appear in front of these judges all the time, and I cannot stress to you enough the importance of voting all the way down the ballot for all of our Democratic judge candidates. We really do need that reform. And we're supposed to tell everybody, you know, those of us on the slate, we're supposed to tell everybody to vote straight Democrat. And that's what you should do. You should vote straight Democrat. But I'm not going to do that, and let me tell you why. I'm going to go down from Beto all the way to Justice of the Peace and vote individually for every single Democratic candidate up and down the ballot. Because after 2 years of Trump and everything that's been happening with him and Greg Abbott and Dwayne Bohack and all their cronies here in Texas, I'm not going to let them deprive me of the pleasure that I'm going to get. I'm punching the Democratic button literally over 100 times if you vote the whole ballot. Right? So you have that to look forward to starting on October 22nd. So I got into this race, like I said, about a year and a half ago. Never thought I would run for anything, and we made it through a primary and have been doing this now for quite a while. And what got me into it was Senate Bill 4, the Show Me Your Papers bill. You know, it was an accumulation of things, but that was kind of the final straw that pushed me over the edge into actually doing this, because the person I'm running against, who's been in there since 2002, Tea Party incumbent, not only voted for that, but so, you know, some of the Republicans at least voted for an amendment where they were going to try to exempt elementary schools and domestic violence shelters. So at least we're not going to have people getting harassed over immigration paperwork in those kind of sensitive locations. But he didn't even vote for that amendment, which I just felt was not only bad policy, but it's just totally, frankly, unacceptable just at a basic human level. And so as a result of that, I got into this race. Other issues that we're very concerned about include public education. I think for those of us running in state races, which, you know, everybody from Lupe for governor on down to those of us running for the state legislature, this election in 2018 is really a referendum at the state level on what are we going to do for our public school system. Because the funding has been cut so far, so down to the bone at the state level, going all the way back to the 2011 session. They cut $5.4 billion out of the budget back in 2011 that they've never put back. And the Chronicle just was covering recently the effects of that. And for those of you who are teachers or who have friends or family members who are teachers, you know that the teacher benefits in Texas in terms of health care and retirement, it's literally 50 out of 50 out of all the states in the country. And it's, you know, we haven't had a cost of living increase in almost 2 decades. That's bad for the teachers, it's bad for the students in terms of teacher recruitment and retention. And what I'm finding out there on the campaign trail is that it's one of the few issues, and the other one is flood control, where there are some people who are, you know, not hardcore Republicans, but Republicans who are open to crossing over under the right circumstances for the right person, is on these public school issues. As an example of that, I was out going door to door this weekend, and there was a house that wasn't even on my list, which means that either there was nobody registered there, or more probably that they're, have voted in every Republican primary back to the Reagan administration. But they had a sign in their yard for Texans for Public Education, which is a bipartisan group that encourages block voting for pro-public school candidates. And so I'm endorsed by them as the block vote candidate. So I thought, well, I should at least knock on the door and introduce myself to this person, even though they're probably have voted in all these Republican primaries. They weren't home. I left a note, and then later that day, I got a text message from this lady that the reason that she wasn't there when I knocked on her door is because she was out block walking for me. Through the Texans for Public Education. I had never met her or spoken to her or heard of her name until she texted me and said she was doing that. So that's, of course, very encouraging, that the issue is finally bubbling up to the surface and people have had enough. The other one, which I came in for the tail end to hear Penny talk about, of course, is flooding. Huge issue throughout this area that I'm running in, Cy-Fair, Spring Branch. The state has done nothing about flooding for 25 years, and if you listen to them, you'll say, oh, that's just because it's not the state's responsibility, it's not the state's role. And the only reason why that's the case is because they've just chosen to let it be that way. There's no reason, no inherent reason why they can't do anything other than they just want to pass the buck to somebody else. And especially in these unincorporated parts of the county where there's even less oversight than we have in the city of Houston, it's just critical that we get a state legislature that's actually going to get serious about reining in these big developers who are wanting to pave over everything. We can't have successful flood control if we're just going to continue to do the same kind of foolish projects and unprotected construction that we've had for the last 30 years. And it's not about shutting it down. My dad is a floor installer. He's not like he owns the company. Like, he actually installs hardwood and tile floors. So I'm not trying to shut down construction. I don't know anybody who wants to do that. But all of these projects, there's a way that you can do it, whether it's based on location or other protections that either have a neutral impact on flooding, or in some cases you can actually do it to be a net positive. And that's just not being done because these big developers and their lobbyists are giving hundreds of thousands of dollars to politicians in Harris County and in Austin. The guy that I'm running against, we just tallied it up the other day, and since he's been running, he has taken over $380,000 from the big developer construction industry. And you might have read about out in Spring Branch, this was actually covered by the Washington Post. There's that old golf course out there, right? Pinecrest. And they're now building 900 homes over top of that in the middle of a floodplain. And a lot of people are blaming the city for that, and the city deserves its share of the blame. But the way that got started is because there was a special interest bill passed through the Texas legislature to create a municipal utility district right over top, only covering that old golf course, right over top of it. Those are the boundaries. In order to allow that project to be built, ultimately with taxpayer money from the people who are moving in there, to basically have it subsidized with tax dollars. And the guy who wrote that bill and got it passed through the Texas legislature is Dwayne Bohack, who I'm running against. Another story I'll tell you from going door to door. I knocked on this lady's door who probably shouldn't have been on my list, but somehow she got on there. Because one of the first things she said to me, this is a direct quote, "I hate all Democrats." That's where it started. But then by the end of it, we were talking about these flooding issues and Pinecrest in particular. She lives right by there. And she was so upset over that construction project and they're ripping down all these trees. She's actually crying about it because she's lived out there for 30 years and seen all these trees torn down where her kids have gone to the park. So, that person's now voting for probably one Democrat, but at least so that's what we're finding in terms of the issues that I'm really engaged in, that I think people care about a lot. The other one, of course, is healthcare. It's absurd that all of us have been paying for 10 years federal tax money to Washington for the Affordable Care Act, and we're just refusing to take it. It didn't make sense not to take it 8 years ago, but the excuse was at that time it was this political stunt because they didn't want to upset their primary voters by supporting something that was initiated by President Obama. I mean, he's not in office anymore, and yet we're still not taking the money. But we have 200,000 people here in Harris County alone who it's really the flip of a switch. We just have to get a legislature that's going to vote to accept this money that's already sitting there. And right here in Harris County, we would have 200,000 more people having access to quality, affordable health insurance. And so these are the things that have motivated me to get into the race, and that I'm finding are on a lot of people's minds as I'm going door to door. And because I had a primary and I started doing it in June, we've been to thousands. I've been personally to thousands and thousands of doors. So pardon me, I'm kind of just telling all these war stories and weaving them together into hopefully some semi-coherent narrative. But the other thing that I think is very encouraging for all of us up and down the ballot, and those of us who want to see change and want to see the blue wave, is I'm noticing this phenomenon where people, everybody has kind of stepped it up at least one level. I've found so many people who had never voted in a midterm before, now they're doing it. And we've seen so many people who have voted in a midterm for the first time ever, they're putting a sign in their yard. They used to, well, I don't want to upset the neighbors. Now they have a sign. We have people who all they ever did before was put up a sign. Now they're making phone calls. Now they're going door to door. I had somebody email me out of the blue last night who is 25. The only time she has ever voted ever was in the 2016 presidential election, and she emailed to ask for a yard sign for a down ballot candidate running for the State House of Representatives. I don't know what it was that prompted that. So that's just one example. I was block walking in Spring Branch this weekend. If you follow me on social media, you might have seen the picture. Somebody had literally spray painted on the oak tree in their front yard, Beto, like a huge permanent spray paint. My guess is that that's probably the result of somebody having stolen their sign. Probably the thought process was, steal this, right? Come and take it. But it's just, the level of enthusiasm out there, and probably everybody in here has similar stories like that. The lady, I work at a law firm downtown, the lady who cleans our office, I felt bad after the fact because I should have thought to initiate this conversation. But she came up to me, I've never spoken about anything political with her, she came up to me and asked for 6 voter registration forms so she could register for herself and everybody in her family. And I mean, this is, like I'm saying, I'll bet everybody here could tell a story like that. And so with all this excitement and all this energy, we've got a little less now than, well, all the way to November 6th. I'm thinking of early voting, but we have a little less than 3 weeks until early voting starts to capitalize on that. And I think the biggest thing that I'm working on and that everybody can do is just making sure that the people in your own network, everybody in your house, your niece, your daughter, grandson, whoever it is, we see all these, as I'm knocking on doors, we see all these households where there's somebody in there who's a super strong Democratic voter, they've never missed a primary, there's maybe 3 or 4 other people in the house whose records aren't so good, drag them out, whatever it takes, but ice cream cone, whatever you got to do, bribe them. If you need vote by mail forms for anybody, if you're over 65, know anybody who's over 65, you can vote by mail. I have some of those in the car. We're happy to hook you up with those. That's going to be the key thing. I think that if we can all bring, 4 people with us, 5, 6 people with us to the poll, and personally take the accountability to make sure that 5 or 6 people show up who otherwise maybe would not have, then I think we are going to have a blue wave certainly here in Harris County because the numbers are there. Yeah. I mean, we've met the people, we've seen the polling, and it's just who shows up and who doesn't. We just got the proofs back for the piece that I'm going to be using as a door hanger for our Get Out the Vote. And on the front of it, it's got a quote from Michelle Obama, which is very true, that elections are as much about who doesn't show up as who does show up. And that's what really, that's all this is going to come down to. It's just a numbers game. And so if there's anything that you can do between now and November 6th to make sure that somebody else shows up, and I think Penny's going to get elected. I think I'm going to get elected. I think Beto's going to get elected. Or Deidre Davis. Pick your favorite. That's what it's going to take. So being out there on the ground, I'm incredibly encouraged by what I'm seeing. I can tell you, I've been to so many different Democratic club events, at least all over the, this general part of Harris County, and some of the other ones that are, Tejano Democrats and others. The turnout here at Sci-Fair, I mean, this is amazing. This is like one of the best attended, I mean, this is very impressive, and we're in Sci-Fair, right? This is not like the traditional Democratic stronghold. And we had an event, Penny and I attended, I guess 2 weeks ago now, with Lupe Valdez. We're at a restaurant out on Clay Road, Clay Road and Highway 6. Very well attended, and one of the ladies who attended that wrote to me afterwards that she's been involved in Democratic politics for 20 or 30 years or something, and that whole time she's been waiting for some restaurant in Katy that would be willing to kind of publicly host some Democratic candidate for an office without being afraid of losing a bunch of customers. And it's happening. It's happening in Sci-Fair and in Katy. And so it's incredibly encouraging. Some of the, I don't have polling specific to my race, but I've been, I've had the opportunity to see polling for other kind of similarly competitive House districts. The district I'm running in, Hillary won by about 100 votes in 2016. So if you've been following a lot of these special elections and other races across the country where Democrats are kind of outperforming Hillary by 10 to 15 points, we feel pretty good about it. But there's been polling done in several Texas House districts that were right there, that same general 50-50. And in the ones that they polled, the Democrats were leading in 5 out of 6 of those. So incredibly encouraging. And the stuff that I've seen for Harris County shows that among core Democratic constituency groups, the interest in showing up and voting this year is like through the roof compared to the historical polling comparisons that they have access to. So it's all good. It's couldn't be going any better from my perspective. I've never run before, so I guess take it with a grain of salt. But I can tell you, being out there knocking on doors almost every day, that the energy is just palpable. And if we're able to get all of our friends and family out to the polls, then I think we're going to wake up very happy on November 7th. I mean, you're making a comment. I mean, my wife actually said the same thing the other night. It's kind of, the only positive, safe to say, the only positive out of the Trump administration has been this energy and this excitement, and more people finally realizing that the parties aren't the same, and your vote does make a difference. And people are really starting to understand that due to the tragic and unfortunate circumstances that we're all living through right now. So thank you, everybody. I'm happy to answer your questions if anybody has any, and if not, then I will turn it back over to you.
When can you start?
January 1st.
We've been talking so much about voting. I use this on block walking, and it's a graph that shows you the voter turnout in 2016 by like a pie chart. The yellow, if you take a good look at that, the yellow are people who could have voted but didn't vote. Wow. And this is 2016. It's huge. It is. That's I mean, we're like the we're the lowest turnout. This election's going to be very different, but yeah, just to show you what, so Adam's stressing, it's all about people going to the polls. It really is. It really, really is.
That's a shame.
Was this for Penny? I think the chart, I think it was just for Texas, yeah. Yeah, just for Texas. And that's, I saw Donna posted the other day in the Sci-Fair Democrats Facebook group, you know, even in races like, you know, Lupe running against Greg Abbott, some of the pundits and everything want to say, oh, this is all foregone conclusion and blah, blah, blah. Really, it isn't. I mean, if you look at this chart, it's not a foregone conclusion if people in the orange part of the pie chart show up to vote.
Yes.
So.
No, she didn't. All right.